Now we can kind of turn to a few examples of this making versus allowing. Making versus allowing, for example, like euthanasia, where you have right to die. For a making would be where you could maybe give drugs. It's a big push right now in several states. Oregon was one of the first. California recently passed it. There was a person by the name of I think it was Kim Diaz. Her last name is Diaz. Brittany. I'm sorry. Kim Diaz is like a person who's involved in the movement. I get emails about it, and so that name for some reason jumped out. Brittany Maynard. Recently, she had brain cancer, and at 29 years old, actually just a few days shy of her 30th birthday, she knew she was going to die from brain cancer. It would have been a very bad death, and so in an effort to prevent having to go through this period where she could have seizures and be incapacitated and have significant problems, and basically wither away for months on end, she decided to take medication and kill herself. Well, in California, that's not legal. So she actually moved to Oregon so that she could legally do this. As far as it goes, it was not, she is a person of some means, and it started her and people who are her family and friends started a movement to try to expand that law. And it seems to be catching her. I think it's the fourth or fifth state California just recently passed. This is speaking in October 2015, recently passed a right to die law. Now, what happens is if you go out and you take medication to kill yourself, that is clearly making yourself die. And so some people have a real issue with that. Whereas on the other hand, if you were to refuse treatment and you were to say, you know what, I'm going to die, I don't want to go through chemotherapy, you would simply be allowing the natural processes to continue and you would die. It may take a while, it may be painful, but you're not taking preventive steps. Every time you eat, you are preventing death. And so if you were to stop eating, you would be simply allowing death to take its course. There are a lot of these examples. Of course, you can't really, it'd be tough to starve yourself to death and be completely, it would be a difficult thing to do. At least that's my understanding, is it would not be as simple as just, it would take many days and be very painful. But so what happens is that's simply allowing yourself to die, versus making is where you go out and cause it to occur. Bombings. Examples of bombings with this is like, for example, terrorist bombing is where you go out and you make people scared. But maybe, for example, with strategic bombing, sometimes, bombs will blow off course and innocent people will die. And that's simply allowing innocent people to die. It's called collateral damage. It's not intended. Making is when you kill innocent people, non-combatants, in order to cause fear or terror or other things. That's called terror bombing. And so there's a distinction between making innocent people die and simply allowing them to die by accident. Examples of this I always like to use the example that during World War II, they'd fly these huge bombs, these huge bombing planes, and there'd be like 30 of them. They would take off from England and they would fly over Germany and some of the other countries in Europe where the Germans had put up munitions plants and other things, and they would bomb them. Now today, most of us are familiar with the fact that if they go on a bombing run, a bomber will take off from, sometimes in the United States, fly over the ocean. There's a base in Missouri where they fly stealth bombers. And they'll fly out over the ocean, they'll refuel, they'll fly up over Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever, drop their bombs, turn around, refuel out over the Mediterranean or Indian Ocean, or whichever way they're going, and then continue back and maybe refuel one more time before landing back in Missouri, and never land that entire time. They'll be up in the air for about 24 to 30 hours, fly over to Iraq, drop their bombs, and come back. And these people, they'll be married, have wife and kids. They'll be like, I can't mow the lawn today. I got to get to work to fly to Iraq and drop some bombs and come back. But what happens is when they take off in that plane, they will probably bomb two different places and probably destroy them both. Whereas in World War II, you'd have 30 of these bombers, which would be loaded up with hundreds of bombs each. You'd have thousands of bombs, and they would simply just drop them, carpet bomb the whole area. Of course, the bombs were not strong, munitions were not strong, but they would bomb the heck out of an entire area. And to a large degree, it was very easy for bombs to blow off course, for them to miss their target. It was very easy. And so oftentimes, you'd try to bomb a munitions plant, you'd hit the school nearby. And they would say, you're not making the children die. You weren't intending to do it. It's what simply allowed to occur. So they would make a distinction. And then the other example would be like I use the baby carriage here. That like for example, you decide I'm going to push the baby carriage down a hill and hurt the baby. The other option would be is you're sitting on a bench about halfway down the hill and a mother yells, "Help my baby!" and you see her carriage has run away and you go, that's going to be painful, and you could jump up and stop it because you're towards the bottom of the hill and you could do it. Maybe you might hurt yourself a little bit, but you could do it, and you just go, whatever, I don't want to get up, right? That would be allowing it to occur. Now, for the utilitarian, they would say, look, there is no difference. If you get up that hill and you push that baby down, or you just don't stop it, you are as guilty of that baby's harm as you would be if you actually did it. But they also say the same thing about like bombings, and they say the same thing about euthanasia. Whereas the Kantian makes this distinction, they say, no, there is a legitimate difference. If you go up the hill and you push the baby down, then you have clearly done an act against the baby. But if you don't stop it, yeah, I mean, it's probably not the best thing to do, but it's just what it is. I mean, there's really nothing more to say about it. Euthanasia and bombings, though, they would say, there is a difference between, taking a life by giving medication and killing them versus simply allowing them to die. There's a difference between terror bombing and strategic bombing with collateral damage. There is a difference. The intent makes the difference. These people were trying to behave in an ethical way, and things bad just happened, and we cannot hold them account. And so this is a pretty big distinction, because a lot of our moral issues, we do see this distinction as very important. We obviously don't think positively of people who shove baby carriages down, or people who don't fail to stop to help them. But at the same time, most of us also think that there is a significant difference between somebody who is bombing with the intention of killing children versus somebody who is bombing and they just happen to hit a school by accident. We sometimes think that there is a significant difference between making with suicide, or not suicide, with euthanasia, whereas there's a difference between somebody who goes out and kills themselves versus somebody who simply fails to take medication and dies. We usually see those as fairly significant differences. And that is where it is how do we deal with those two things? And that's one of the things that when you get into applied ethics with Kant and Bentham and Mill, that this becomes a real issue, is how do we deal with some of these cases where we can't just clearly apply one. We have to think, we see how utilitarianism would approach it, we see how Kant would approach it, but yet both of them don't fully capture this making versus allowing distinction.